Please, we can start. Yes.
Okay. Since 1 year I'm participating here. Oh, I'm starting crying again, sorry. So this is what's happening. I'm starting to cry. I'm becoming angry. I don't take care of myself. And every time I hear him teach these, what I hear say is practice generosity, practice compassion. And the first thing that's coming up with me, how? What to do? If I'm starting to cry or feeling sad, it doesn't feel okay. Most the thing, getting angry, it's what's to do, how to catch with it, how just not to become angry is not the solution for me. Because it's sometimes looks like my mind doesn't hear the word not. Not become angry, angry becomes bigger. So that doesn't work. So, what's your advice on that?
So, anger there are texts of which chapters are devoted, whole chapters are devoted on anger, right? I'm sure you have come across those texts. All of us, anger is very much part of our, anger is very much part of our mental activity. It is a very, very important part, actually. Just as desire is so important in our human development, so is anger, right? So anger together with desire, they form and they have an important place in our minds. Okay, now, with these two emotions, anger and desire, they are useful. In many ways, they are useful. But both of these emotions, if they are not regulated, then they can be self-harming, right? They can be harmful. So we have to know a little bit about our anger, our desire. This is important. And we have to know what is it that triggers these two emotions, our desire and our anger. And we have to understand what type of desire do we have, what type of anger do we have. This is important also. Suppressed desire, suppressed anger is, I think, unhealthy. Right? So we have to try to find the source of our anger, of our desire. The source is very important. We have to find problem formulation, right? We have to find out why are we the way we are. It's so important. Only by truly knowing that would we be able to find the source. So we have to work on this. We all have anger issues. We all have desire issues. And if we have a better picture of that, then I think it helps in facing our anger, in facing our desire, and dealing with our anger and our desire. So we have to find out. We have to find out. Now, with anger, many times blame is associated with anger. Right? Blaming is in a way, I think, like outsourcing. It's quite interesting, blaming. We can blame someone for our problems, but how long can we go on blaming others for our problems, right? At one point, we have to find a different technique of standing up to our anger. We have to stop blaming. We have to stop the outsourcing process. But rather, we have to face and then try to uproot anger from its very source, from its very roots, than just outsourcing our anger. So this is, again, very important. Yeah. But like you said, it's not easy. Try not to be angry. When we hear this word, try not to be angry, then we become angry, right? It's a bit like saying, all of you here, I have a very simple meditation. Try not to think of an elephant. If I tell you that, then the image of an elephant comes up naturally, right? So it's similar. Try not to be angry. Then the person that you are holding your anger against comes up. The person, the situation, whatever that may be, it's going to come up. It's going to pop up, right? This is something that we are all too familiar with, to a certain extent. So then we simply cannot try to what's the word, when we sweep and then hide the dust under the carpet? We cannot do that, right? We have to face the reality and then try to work on that. Try to work on it. And it takes some effort, obviously, but we have to work on that. This is the point. We have to develop the courage. I think it's so important. Just in the context of the Lojong practice, of the practice of, let's say, Tonglen, the practice of giving and taking, that one needs to cultivate, generate courage in order to really thoroughly practice Tonglen. Likewise, we also need to develop courage when confronting our destructive or unpleasant emotions, our mental issues, our history, So we have to go back. We have to read our history. you know, to think about in order to overcome our problems, then we have to look back in time. We have to look at our history and not turn a blind eye on that, you know. It's important. That's what the Dharma is trying to show us like the map of our mind, you know. So we have to study that map. We have to study where one road leads to, which road is connected to which road, and how are those two places connected, and how many roads are there, and so forth, like that. You get the point, right? So this is, I think, we just have to find a way. There's definitely a way, but we have to find that. And sometimes we have to gather the courage in our mind to face anger, to bring the image, to work on it, and not try to not let it chase us, you know, not let it chase us. This is, I think, very important. That there needs to be a closure, you know. So we have to, gather the courage, and then overcome our anger, our desire. So like that. And as I was saying before, whatever unpleasant situation that we may find ourselves in, what I find, I mean, this technique I find personally very useful, is that if I look at myself, and if I put myself in the center of the universe, and then I am confronted by these unfavorable conditions, then of course, just by virtue of taking that viewpoint, I'm going to magnify that unconditional, that the severity of that, the unpleasantness of that situation. I'm definitely going to magnify that, you know, with this viewpoint. So I just try to think about all the other people who are in similar situations, and to recognize that it is not only me, it is not only I that is facing this challenge, but there are also others who are likewise going through the same situation, or even in some unfortunate cases, even worse situations, right? So like this, I think we have to use different techniques, whatever we can, to just let it pass. Let it be itself. Just let that be. So like this. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Okay, so yes, please.
Thank you. When earlier you were speaking about finding a common ground in relating to others, and therefore you have to take some step away from your own point of view, and simultaneously you also emphasize holding on to the Dharma while relating to others. And I find myself sometimes wondering how to combine it, because I'm holding on much to the Dharma, especially nowadays, since I'm very inspired by it. And then when I'm relating to others who do not have this Buddhist perspective, how to. Yeah, I was wondering if you could elaborate on that really paradoxical situation.
The Dharma isn't something that the Buddha invented. It's not. As we say, as with many of the other Buddhist philosophies, it has no beginning, right? The Dharma has no beginning. It is not an invention. So this is one thing. And then, when one follows the Buddha's teachings and tries to integrate that into one's life, and then yet one is, maybe you come into contact with someone who does not necessarily follow the Buddha or have those point of views, I think first we must be careful that as a Dharma practitioner, we have to practice the Dharma in a way that we don't become attached to it. Yeah? So this is very important. It's like it takes, I think, some effort. It's not easy to enjoy something and yet not to hold on to it, right? The Dharma is so good. And then you are like, I don't know, it's like maybe we have to we need joyful effort, but somehow we have to learn to part away from the excitement part, I guess. So we need joyful effort, but not too much excitement. And we need time to do that. It's not easy, right? We have to learn that. It takes some practice, let's say. Joyful effort, but without excitement. I don't know if that's possible, but maybe this excitement is something that's very much part of this holding on to something, you know.
You want to share it also because you feel will benefit, especially also someone who you see they keep following every desire and attachment and aversion in their mind. You want to share it with them, but you don't want to kind of convince or convert them and create some distance in the relationship.
Yes. So like something like, Buddhist psychology, like the Buddhist explanation of the mental emotions, many of those, I think, they can be presented in a non-Buddhist way. Or, many of those explanations, if you see, they're not really, there's nothing Buddhist about them per se, It's just explaining our emotions and how they change and how one emotion affects the other, how they give rise to another state to another mental state, So some of those things I think you can share with them without like you can share it with them, but not necessarily in a Buddhist context. I think that is possible, yeah? So, yeah, I think like this. His Holiness always talks about the Buddhist science, the Buddhist philosophy, and I think Buddhist practice, right? Talks about these 3 levels, 3 layers. So the middle one, Buddhist philosophy, I think we can share that to someone who may not necessarily be interested in Buddhism, whatever that means, Buddhism. It's one of those isms. But of course, it's an ism that the Buddha never talked about, right? I mean, he talked about the teachings, he talked about the realizations, but he never said Buddhism. So technically, emptiness is not Buddhism. Dukkha is not Buddhism. How the mind works is not Buddhism. And if you share the Buddhist perspective of how the mind works with anyone, then technically you're still not sharing Buddhism, right? So one does not really need to feel. I think there's no need for any reservations, right? It's not like one is trying to convert the other person. Not at all. Not at all. But it is a way of looking at the mind, and of course you can share that, and if the person is receptive, of course this is good, then there will be some benefit, and if the other person does not accept that view, then it is perfectly fine to take a step back, there's no problem. So like this, I think, yeah. Was there a follow-up?
No, I think it answered my question.
Okay.
But it's like maybe it's an ongoing exploration in practice. How to not hold on to it while you're inspired, how to share it while not.
Yeah. Yes, and also I think we have to, when it comes to sharing, one thing is important is that whether the person is a receptacle for it or not. We have to always take into account of that, because I mean, with the Dharma, it is like, at least with this approach to the Dharma here in the West, where you are really approaching the Dharma from a psychological point of view, It's like there's a very specific aim when you approach the Dharma. Whereas in Tibetan society, it's quite like, Christianity here, It's people take it for granted, right? And of course we have a population that tries to approach it, that tries to go deeper into it, but then there are many who just do something like very, very simple, very simple, and I could perhaps say more like faith-based, ritual-based. It's almost very cultural, right? So these kind of, so obviously it takes a person who has this kind of interest in asking these questions, like existential questions and so forth. If one is simply satisfied by the face value, then of course there's no need for all this explanation, right? So we have to sort of get a little, I guess, like we need to have a little clue about the person, whether this person has some interest in like further investigating the mind and asking this kind of questions. And yeah, I think then we can share, of course, yeah. But on the subject of course, it's not related to your question. It's still, for me, it's interesting because, as you all know, that it is in Buddhism, there isn't this concept of proselytizing, of conversion. We don't have that, right? But nevertheless, in the guidelines, the refuge guidelines, I think one of the guidelines is that one should show the refuge to others or guide others to the refuge. There is one in the guideline. So I have asked this to one of my teachers, and then he said, this doesn't mean that we should go around trying to convert people into Buddhism, but it simply means that if the other person has a genuine interest, in the Dharma, then it is important that we should try to guide them to the three jewels. Yeah? So like this, I think we have to we otherwise, there's a danger that there could be a misunderstanding when one come across this particular guideline, right? So it only means if the other person shows a strong, deep interest in the Dharma, then it's perfectly fine to be open. But otherwise, as to the subject of refuge, faith like this, then I think we have to be very careful and just stick with the philosophy part, with the psychological aspect, with some of the tools that is presented in the Dharma. So of course, I think His Holiness was using the term something like secular ethics, but then I heard that due to some cultural backgrounds in some countries, this term is not really encouraged, right? Because it could create some misunderstanding when secular is used. But anyhow, these universal ethics and even that term, as many of you, I'm sure, recently, at the beginning of this month, His Holiness was in New Delhi, and then there was this global launch of the Sea Learning program, right? So this is really, really wonderful. It's so important that we have to. So Sea Learning, if you don't know, if you haven't heard, C means this SEE means social, ethical, and emotional learning, right? So this Sea Learning is now being implemented, I think, to young school children, right? So this is, I think, very important that young people need to learn about these core values that we share, that we all share. And it's important that we learn about this from a young age. That's so important, because learning something from a young age, I think it has its own benefits, right? It has its own advantage. So not only educating our minds, but educating the heart. That's so important, right? So this is, why, and that is something that also extends, I think, to all our lives. It's not just only from our childhood that we learn about the skills, and then when we are older, then we drop this. It's not like that. We have to always hold on to these values. That's why, like for example, on the Mahayana path, we have the wisdom and method aspect, right? So this is like the mind and the heart, in a way. It's so important. As Chandrakirti says it in this like poetic way, that just as a bird needs 2 wings to fly and cross the ocean, then so does the practitioner. Needs the wings of both the method and the wisdom aspect in order to cross the ocean of suffering, right? So something like this. So we have to always approach the Dharma from these 2 sides, the method and the wisdom. The method and the wisdom. The heart and mind, It's, I think, very important. And as you mentioned in our short conversation, when you mentioned that when we say like self-cherishing is not good, other cherishing is the good part of our mind, then immediately people feel that they should not like take care of themselves or their well-being and completely neglect themselves. So this, I think, this is definitely not the message here, right? And this just reminds me of these questions that have been put forth before. Yeah. So again, thank you for saying that. It just reminds me that when we say self-cherishing, then I think even though in the text it's very, we use this term, say self-cherishing is negative. It is important to not like take it in a way or understand that to be to take that, to like literally take that and then say cherishing oneself is negative. It's not. So this is very important. As His Holiness would say, that if you want others to be happy, then practice compassion. And if you want to be happy yourself, then practice compassion, right? So there's definitely, and His Holiness would sometimes say, if you really want to be happy, or, okay, not like this. He says more like, the real way to be self-cherishing is to cherish others. He would say something like that. If you really want to cherish yourself, then you have to cherish others. So here again we are also not leaving any doubts as to whether in cherishing other that one has to neglect oneself. This is not sustainable, right? If you take it too literally like that, then there will be, I think, it will not be beneficial. So rather than saying I, then we can try to be more like we. No, I think we is a good word. No? Rather than trying to emphasize on just me, then try to include others. Yeah? When we say include others, we are not saying only others, but include others, right? So this is, I think, an important distinction that we have to make internally, mentally. No, we have to make sure that we do not neglect ourselves in that process of trying to cherish others or in reaching out to others. So this is very important, and I just wanted to remind us of that. So thank you. So like this. And we have still 35 minutes. So if you have something to share, we have plenty of time. Please.
I want to say thank you, Rinpoche, for very nice words, and thank you to the organizers for beginning a very interesting topic discussion. I think this is very inspiring. I really like when you talk about loneliness. It reminded me of what I read something recently. I had no idea that apparently, and when I say loneliness apparently, at least in the field of psychology, loneliness is different than just feeling lonely. It's almost like not like a disease, but almost, yeah. So apparently, there's a very large percentage of population, especially in the West, of people who either they feel lonely many times, and also many people who have this loneliness, kind of like a stress, a lot of stress because of loneliness. I was surprised to find out that apparently this even is like a public health issue. And it's like people who feel lonely. It's almost like they smoke. They say that the impact is almost like they would smoke half pack of cigarettes per day. Something. That's how damaging it is to our health to feel lonely all the time. Apparently, I was surprised about this because I think we all keep in our mind like, oh, yeah, okay, it's not. I feel a bit lonely, but everybody. It's normal. And when you look around, it's everybody. Or many people. I think it's very interesting that you mentioned this. And yeah, but at the same time, I think the way our society is built, and some studies say that it's in the root of our society somehow. It's very hard to remember how we were before, how we used to live as communities. Before cities existed, before it's like, I don't know. But I think it's a very interesting thing to think about. And you also mentioned that, I will finish with this, I'm sorry for talking much.
Oh, no, please.
You said we have to have this discussion, so I started to talk too much, so sorry.
Oh, no.
But what I want to say is that, when you said, well, in the monasteries or whatever, the monks know each other quite a lot, and they know many details, or not many details, but they know where they come from.
Enough details.
Enough, yeah. Our culture in the West is like this. It's almost unnatural to find out things about others. It's so hard. At least I feel. We have to push ourselves to try to know others.
Yeah.
But I think it's very important, that we try to do this. I think I've been at Maitreya, mostly in Maitreya, Amsterdam, for about 6 years now, 5 years. And I'm really, really trying to go with as many teachings as possible. But I know I can count on my hand how many people I know their names. And even though I know their names, I don't know much about them. But it's not because they don't share, or it's not because they are not friendly. They are super friendly, and I'm trying to be friendly. But it's just that, it's very hard to connect, I guess. Yeah,
Yes.
it's like
Yes.
it's exactly like you said. It's like we go to school and we listen to teaching, and then we go home, everyone, and we almost nobody knows anymore.
Right. Yeah.
It's very hard. Yeah. It's something interesting to think about.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Yeah, so I think openness is very important. Yeah. So I think being open and opening up, we have to open up, gradually. Of course it's not easy because we are so used to doing things in a certain way, but we have to I wasn't saying that we have to be open for the sake of being open, but of course, I only meant it, I think it would be helpful to open up more if you can see that not being open is somehow a part of this. If that is contributing in a negative way to the relationship. If you can somehow link this problem to not being open, then of course it would be a good thing to be open, right? So we have to be, again, there needs to be a certain balance, even in how open we are, or how much do we share of our personal issues. And well, I can say it, but in English we can say these are personal things. In Tibetan we don't have, there does not exist this term. It doesn't. And this is why I was saying words are so interesting. Words can shape our mind. With our friends, we share everything. We share all our family problems and everything. That's fine, That's fine. So we meet someone and we get to know, not necessarily for many years, and after a few minutes of meeting them, then we talk about our family problems, whatever, all these things. None of those things are considered personal, because we know that it's all the same. It's very similar. Of course, we have different names for our cousins or whatever, but essentially we share more similarities, right? And I think this kind of thinking, so deeply embedded in our mental outlook, then I think it just makes it so much easier in reaching out to others, because through our sharing, then we can feel each other, right? When you do not share, then you are actually sort of taking ownership of your problems, right? You are very much making it a personal issue. But if you share and talk about it, like you talk about the weather, then there is no problem, right? Of course, I have to be careful here in not sort of making this sort of nihilistic in any way, but you get the point, right? You get the point. So this is just food for thought. Food for thought. So it's a way of life, and sometimes it would be a nice thing to tweak around and see what happens, see what if we put this thing here, then what happens? Does it change the dynamic? It's like, once in a while we like to remodel our houses. We like to remodel our rooms and change the setting. And sometimes that's useful, right? So it's a bit like that, I think, sort of remodeling our way of thinking and perhaps not being very archaic in our approach. Yeah, so we have to be open and try new things, and then sticking with the old things as well, and especially the good ones, the ones that works. It's always a good idea to stick by those standards, by those values. Those have stood the test of time. So we do not abandon them in the name of reform or new thinking, whatever. We have to hold on to those traditional values, but yet at the same time we can change the approach, right? We can change that approach. So we have to keep this fine balance, I think. Yeah. So like that. And then, yes, in our Dharma practice, in many centers, there's the Lamrim teachings. I mean, I shouldn't say many centers, but I should say in many Gelug centers, of course, there is the Lamrim teaching, right? It's a wonderful way of presenting the path. It's a wonderful way of presenting that. It's a wonderful graded step. It gives you a base. It shows you, what one has to work on first before going to the next step, and so forth. And as you all know, in the Lamrim, Guru devotion is very much emphasized, right? So I wanted to talk just a little bit on that. His Holiness talks of these two. Remember, he was talking about these two approaches, which is the faith-based approach and then the reason-based or analysis-based approach. These two approaches. And in Maitreya's ornament of realizations, right, Mondoge, then talks of the two truths, the four truths, and then through that introduction to the refuge, like this, in this order. So His Holiness talks of these two approaches, and His Holiness feels that, generally speaking, it is better to adopt the reason-based approach. His Holiness personally feels that this is the approach that, if possible, then we should adopt this approach and not sort of use the faith-based approach right away, right? So this, I think, is very important to first get a sense of what the teaching is talking about, what the Dharma is about, trying to get a sense of that. And then through learning, through contemplating the two truths, the four truths, then we have some basis. There is some basis. And and from this basis, then naturally, I think, the faith will rise. It will materialize. Faith should not be enforced, but it should be. Faith, I think, is like a byproduct. Faith should be the the byproduct. It's not the end product. It's not the main. It is not the main thing, but it simply arises when you develop conviction in the teaching. It just comes by, right? It will naturally arise. So this is why His Holiness is really emphasizing this reason-based approach to the Dharma through the 2 truths, 4 truths, etc. And then introduction to the Dharma like that. So this His Holiness really emphasizes, and of course many of you are aware of this, and we should try to always be analytical in our approach. Ask questions, right? And not just, the Buddha himself said that people should not take his teachings simply because it was taught by him, but rather they should only accept if his words can stand up to analysis, if they can be proven correct by way of analyzing. So like this. So this is the reason-based approach, and then the Loenen teachings, they Bande Adisha, he was instrumental in that, and the king of I think Ngari at that time then requested a teaching, a simple teaching, and this was for his students, right? So therefore, in the Loenen, then it begins right with Guru devotion, because it was really geared towards a very specific audience, right? So this is why when we approach the Loenen, it would be a good thing to first take the reason-based approach, and once having developed some sense of conviction, then it would be a good thing to adopt the Loenen as like a daily practice. Then that's fine, right? Now, in the Loenen, there is a strong emphasis on Guru devotion, right? Guru devotion. So I wanted to just speak a little about that. Guru devotion is very important, but as His Holiness says, that before choosing our gurus, we should be careful. We should really try to understand who this person is, try to find some background of the future guru, of our future guru. It would be a good idea. And His Holiness sometimes jokingly says we should spy on the guru, to find out. So like this, there should be some kind of, I think, it's like, before we go out to buy a car, first we might look around, or we might read the reviews. How many stars is this car? And we look at all those details. The fuel economy, how safe is the car. So we should do something similar with choosing the guru, especially the safety record. How safe is this person? So of course, that safety standard is ethics. Ethics is the safety standard. Safety is very important. This is why in spite, what's the word? Even though we have Tantra, especially Anuttara Yoga Tantra, in the Gelug tradition, yet Je Rinpoche was very adamant about ethics. He made this a priority. It's very important having a conscientious mind, conscientiousness. And there's a whole chapter devoted on that, in the Bodhisattva Chayavatara. So mindfulness, conscientiousness, ethics, a sound moral behavior is the basis of our practice, of future mental developments. These mental developments that we have here in this tanka are depicting the stages of shamatha and the mental developments that lead to shamatha. All of that is based on our ethical values. This is so important, This is so important. So the safety standard, that's number one when going for, I don't know if I can use this term, but it's like guru shopping or the guru market, So when you're out there in the guru market, then make sure to look at the safety standard. It's very important, very important. Just don't give in to hypes. And if there are review sites, try to go to the good review sites. Don't just read any, don't just believe any articles you come across. Just make sure that it comes from a well-meaning source, right? So we have to take this into consideration, because just like buying a car, choosing a guru it's what's the word? It is a big investment. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. But unlike cars, you cannot change your gurus every few years. That's the bad thing about about the guru market, is that once you choose a guru, you have to stick with the guru. Whether it's not like, my guru used to be young and nice, but now he has grown old. I just want a new guru. It's not like that. Of course, with a car, you can say that, right? If it becomes old, it's not like you have to stick with that car, right? But even for something that you are going to only spend a few years with, if you take so much things into consideration, then something like choosing a guru, which is for the long term, then of course one needs to do some investigation, right? Now there are of course people who just jump into it without going through all this reviewing process. Now that is of course it can be dangerous, but if you jump for the right guru, there is no looking back. It's all good, right? If for example, if someone with no Buddhist background, sees on the subway a picture of His Holiness, and it says His Holiness will be in town in September, and then the person thinks, maybe I should attend this talk, and the person goes there and is very impressed, and then just automatically accepts His Holiness as the person's guru. In that case, there is no way that His Holiness would do something to reverse this person's decision, right? Or making the person regret having made this decision, having chosen His Holiness as the person's guru. So this approach, it can be dangerous when you sort of dive into establishing a relationship with a person who does not necessarily have high safety stars, or I don't know, these crash tests, they have lots of stars. They give 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, maybe even a half star. So if you choose for someone with only a half star, well, good luck, And if you get in a crash, there's no guarantee, right? So this is why we have to be very careful, to not just simply act on our impulses, not just simply act on our feel-good factor, Is that right? Or okay? So we have to be. I think, of course, you can. There are 2 approaches, and there are many people who have taken the shortcut, but they went for the right person, and that's all fine, But just to be safe, it makes more sense to take this longer approach. And I think in that process, it would be perfectly fine to attend the Guru's teachings, or even attend something like initiations from the lower, right? From the lower tantra sets, in preferably in which there isn't a Vajra master initiation, right? So that's fine, I think we can be somewhat liberal, we can be somewhat relaxed like that, So just because you take an initiation doesn't mean you have to be like super strict. You don't need to. But if this has a Vajra master initiation, then of course by virtue of having that, then there needs to be some more. It's almost like you're establishing a direct contact with a person, right? In the other situations, then the Lama acts almost like a guide, but it's more with the deity and yourself, right? So we have to think like this, right? And then, having established Guru devotion, as it is mentioned in the Lamrim, the guidelines, right? It talks of, there are many pages dedicated to that. Now, just as the Buddha has said, that one has, the Buddha says, you are free to accept it or not. That's really your responsibility. Likewise, we have to apply the same thing. Of course, in some of the Guru devotion guidelines, they give many extreme examples, right? But this you have to really ask yourself whether this is applicable to you or not. If it is not, leave it. It's that simple. It's that simple, right? And the Buddha had said that if the spiritual master, if the spiritual friend says something that does not accord with the Dharma, then don't do it. So you can always take comfort in that. If the Guru says something that goes beyond convention, that goes against ethical standards, then I would strongly recommend that you can leave that advice aside and don't have any second thoughts. Don't think, will there be repercussions down the road? Don't think that. There will not be. Of course, in the highest tantras, there are some almost like threatening verses there. Of course there is, right? Those of you who have taken Anudara Yoga Tantra would know. But for example, my Lama who lives in Germany, Tayajangol Rinpoche mentioned that Rinpoche omits these parts. Yeah? So I think this is in itself like a guideline. So this is the beautiful thing about the Dharma, is that there is this flexibility. It's not like you can modify everything to however you feel. Today you feel like your mode, you're like in this mode, tomorrow you're in that mode, and then you can sort of just like, it's not like, and then do this remix kind of things. It's not like to that extent, but it has to be based on, I think, common sense. As long as you can base it on not secular, as long as you can, with this ethical conduct, these ethical values, this is the bare minimum, and if anything does not accord with that, then you are free to reject. You are free to do that. There's no person that can intimidate you with some verses that was written many centuries back. And if someone tries to do that, I'm sorry, but I have to say it like this: BS. Yeah, you get the point, right? So whatever happens, always try to base everything on these secular. Not secular, sorry. What's this word with this secular? It keeps coming back. Universal. The ethical values. This is the safety standard. So if you have that, and then you have a basis to work on. You have a basis to build and then develop, right? To develop. So this is like the threshold. This is how we decide what goes in and what goes out, So always use that. Always try to use that, This is the reference point. It's very important. It's very important. Because if you take those verses on Guru devotion, some of those verses on Guru devotion literally, then when this teaching falls in the wrong hands, then this is catastrophe begins. People's life become destroyed. They are forever scarred mentally. They are abused. They go through dehumaning. It gets really bad, right? But of course, with Tilopa and Naropa, it's different, huh? There was a good ending, But in the cases that we hear nowadays, it's very difficult. I doubt that the person will be like Naropa. I think it's different. Yeah?
It's called crazy wisdom, right? Crazy wisdom.
I don't know what it is called.
Lama Tsongkhapa was against this kind of gurus who have this crazy wisdom, like crazy behavior.
I don't know the exact term, what term that Lama Tsongkhapa used, but it definitely is not crazy wisdom. Now, I don't think we had such a term for that. What Je Tsongkhapa had said is that no matter what practice we do, we should always base it on the Sarvaka teachings, on the teachings that he gave mainly to the Sharvakas. Sharvaka? What? Sharvaka, Nyentu Tenu. So the Sharvaka Pitaka, this is the basic teaching. And everything is built on that. And no matter how high the teaching is, no matter how high it is supposed to be, if it goes against the Sharvaka Pitaka, then don't do it. It's that simple. This was Tsongkhapa's take on how one should behave, how one should practice the Dharma. So I think we have to, as long as we understand like this, and as long as we know where to sort of hold on to, what to hold on to when things go wrong, as long as we have an idea of that, then we are safe. Whatever situation we find ourselves in, then we know where to put our feet, We have some solid ground. So this is so important, very important. Really for our own practice, this is something very important. And if we have a solid base, then it doesn't matter about the little things that can happen in life, because we have these things to stand on. At least we are grounded, We have found something, some solidity, a foundation, a base. This, I think, is so important. And it is on this base that all these things that we see here, all the realizations that is symbolized in these wonderful images are built on these ethical values, And we have to always try to link all these holy images to that. To always link those, not see them as distinctively different things. They are not. For example, shamatha is a heightened version of the concentration that we all have. It's simply that. It's not like shamatha is something that we have to try to achieve. It's like so high up there. It's not, right? It just means we have like the recipe for shamatha. We have it. Now we just need to fine-tune that, right? So like that. And same thing with enlightenment. We have the recipe for enlightenment. Now we just need to cook it. The cooking part, that's and we're not cooking right now. So we have to cook, We have the recipe, but now we have to stop being lazy and do some cooking. Okay, so now it's 5:00. So thank you for putting up. Thank you for putting up, and I hope you will have a wonderful evening, and till next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You all have a good time, and I'll be here tomorrow, and now I'm looking forward to spending some quality time with Jessica. I have some catching up to do. Yeah, thank you. And I know that some of you will be going to France, attending this wonderful program with Lama Zong Rinpoche. So those of you who are going there, I wish you the best. And I know this is going to be very, very special. And last month, I was in Dharamsala receiving teachings, first, of course, from His Holiness, Maitreya teachings, and then later a Lamrim teaching from Zong Rinpoche. And during that time, I had this opportunity to meet Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and we had tea and had a very nice time, even though it was somewhat short, because when you spend time with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, it's never long enough. So we had a very nice time together, and I'm happy that Rinpoche will be coming to Europe and doing this practice. If you see, if you look, this practice, this is a rare opportunity. It's a very rare opportunity. And those of you who have taken the moment, I really rejoice. I really rejoice that. So you have a great time. Okay.